want to see, who do we have in our committee? I'm seeing Rita Popper and Michelle Birnbaum and Barry Schneider. Let's see who else. Barbara Rudder, Lori Boris. Whoa, we got a big crowd here.
We do.
Valerie Mason.
Valerie, let's see, Lori Boris. Let me see who I can see here. And I see Jordan. And I see Billy Freeland. And let's see who else. I see, I don't know if Sharon Pope is here or Marco. Are they on yet?
They both are.
They both are. Will, can you help us identify any new members that may be on that we may not be aware of?
Yes, Trisha is also on, but that's not a new member.
Rebecca Dangor also there, right? Rebecca?
Correct.
And is that Peter Borak? Are you there?
I don't see Peter, but don't doubt you're right. Did you see Felice Farber as a new board member?
Oh, okay, good. Welcome, Felice.
Welcome.
I didn't see Felice.
And Tiana.
And Tiana, good. Oh, we have let's see, we have quite a group here. Welcome, Tiana, also. Let's see if there's anyone else. We have quite a.
Yeah, I'm taking notes, so I can go over the list once again as far as I see.
Yeah, why don't you do that, Craig? Go over the list.
Sure.
And Peter S's iPhone, that's Peter Borak.
Yeah, Peter.
I see you nodding. Okay,
we got Peter. That's Peter.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so as of now, in terms of Community Board 8 members, I see, in addition to myself and Chuck, Barbara Rudder, Barry Schneider, Billy Freeland, Felice Farber, Jack Zimmerman, Jordan Wilk, Lori Boris, Marco Tamayo, Michelle Birnbaum, Rebecca Dangor, Rita Popper, Sharon Marshall Pope, or Pope Marshall, excuse me, Trisha Shimamura, and then Peter Baroque and Taina, our new member as well. If there's anyone I'm missing,
yeah, speak up if there's anyone else here.
or raise your hand. I guess Will, our district manager, will go through the process in terms of how this meeting is going to work in terms of participation, in terms of raising hands. If anyone does not know how to raise hands using Zoom, we'll go through that process very briefly, and then we'll, I guess, get started with our first agenda item.
Yep. Will, why don't you go ahead and talk about how we're going to proceed just with our new Zoom feature here.
All right, yeah, well, welcome everyone. We are, you'll notice that everyone is muted right now and you are unable to unmute yourself. Right now, Craig and Chuck, the co-chairs, they are unmuted. They can call on people who raise their hands through the participants menu. You'll find the participants menu at the bottom of your screen. It looks like the shape of two people side by side and has the number 29 next to it right now. If you click on that, it'll open up the participants menu and it'll give you an option at the bottom left-hand corner to raise hand. So we'll quite frequently say raise your hand if you would like to do something. Please don't just raise your visual hand. We won't actually be able to see you. You do need to raise your hand through the participants menu. If you're having a hard time finding that, please chat me through the chat box. Otherwise, if you're on the phone, that to raise your hand is *9. Again, that's *9 if you're on the phone to raise your hand. Otherwise, find it in the participants menu at the bottom of your screen. I'll hand it over to the
Okay,
co-chairs.
well, listen, thank you. We want to welcome everybody to the May meeting of the Transportation Committee of Community Board 8. And I'm Chuck Warren, co-chair, and Craig Lader, my fellow co-chair, and we're glad to see everybody. And the first, why don't we just get to it? And I see that we have Marcus Book from New York City Transit and Colleen Chattergoon from DOT, and they're going to report to us on how DOT and New York City Transit have been forced to adjust to COVID-19 and how that has and will continue to impact the community going forward. So why don't I start with someone who purports to be Marcus Book, but it's hard to, but I haven't seen him looking quite like this, but I take your word for it.
Okay, so stop.
Welcome, Marcus.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good.
Everybody okay?
Oh,
It's good to see everybody. Hi, Colleen. How are you? So, so a report on New York City Transit. I think there's been a lot of information in the news about where we stand. In the early days, we were hit pretty hard with a lot of our employees who came down with COVID-19. As a result of that, we also had employees in the thousands. I won't say thousands, but more than 1,000 employees who were, as a result, quarantined. And that led eventually to us to where we are today, which is an essential service, which is basically running everything that we can run with the available staff, and trying to provide essentially service for those who are essential to the running of the city. So that's our job right now, and we ask anyone who is not essential to basically stay home until this thing passes over. Last night, you might have read in the newspaper that for the first time in our history, we closed down the system overnight, beginning at 1 a.m. in the morning and returning service at 5 a.m. So, I mean, I can explain a lot of things. Basically, we doubled. In order to run that service, at 1 o'clock, we asked everyone to leave the system. Although we're asking everybody to leave the system, trains that are still in the system are still operating. So if you're in the system at 1 o'clock or after 1 o'clock, then when you arrive at your destination, it'll be exit only. People won't be allowed to enter into the system. And at 5 a.m., we were up and running again. And last night was pretty successful. I've got numbers. We've basically doubled the number of bus service on highly critical routes throughout the system to make sure that we keep moving people, moving essential workers. And that went well. So going forward, I think this is where we are right now until further notice. The governor kind of has a press conference every day and he lays all this out as much as possible. We'll continue to close the system at 1 a.m., between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning to do deep cleaning of all of our trains, stations, and we're disinfecting and cleaning on a 24-hour cycle as it is now. We have some work that's continuing in the system in terms of construction, and other work is on pause. Regarding big policy issues and such like budget and and other things, congestion pricing, that stuff is part of a pretty lively debate discussion that takes place on a regular basis at the MTA board meetings. So that information is available. I think the next board meeting is the 24th. I can check when someone else is talking. I'll go grab a piece of paper. I moved my station and left a few things in the kitchen. But yeah, it's not been easy. It's not been easy. Most of our staff is working from home, except those that are required to run the essential service, meaning track maintenance, trains, buses, and the like. And we're doing the best we can. I think we're doing a fantastic job. As the frontline workers go, as far as, hospital workers, I think New York City Transit workers are also part of that frontline hero group and status. And we're going to continue to provide service. So if
Marcus,
you guys, Yeah.
Can you, Marcus, can you talk about a little bit about how you're dealing with the homeless population? And I know there were a lot of sleeping on trains, and I guess they have to get off at 1 o'clock.
Sure. So basically, in the lead up to this, we had a mounting problem with the homeless sort of sheltering in our subway system overnight. So right now with the essential nighttime service, like I said, at 1 a.m. in the morning, we have, there were about 700 NYPD officers in the system last night. And that's going to be continued. We're getting that support from the mayor's office. In addition to the police assisting people with leaving the system, when it's not heavy-handed, you know, we also have staff from Homeless Services assisting us as well to kind of offer people either the opportunity to either leave the system or to accept shelter through the available mechanisms that the city provides. So right now at 1 a.m., everyone has to leave the system. After 1 a.m., after the trains depart, and I can give you the email address at mta.info, and it's nighttime essential service. And basically it tells you when the last train is leaving from probably your area. It's got all the subway lines, and it tells you when the last train departed and when it's going to be departing from your station. So once everybody's cleared out, then, you know, Homeless Services kind of takes over and deals with that issue. But, you know, our goal is to make sure that come 5 a.m. In the morning, we have a clean and safe system for our employees as well as the riding public.
And Marcus, I have two questions before we pass it on to Colleen, and then we'll open it up for everyone else to ask questions. But building on Chuck's question, is there anything being done to restrict access to stations during the overnight hours, since most stations don't necessarily have gates because it is a 24-hour system? And then the second question, and this is in regards to inquiries that the community board has received, and also it's out in the news, is that because of the reduced service and because, as we all know, of the challenges that New York City Transit has had with staffing due to the fact that so many have unfortunately gotten sick or have been quarantined. And we all appreciate very greatly the work that's done. And for those who haven't seen it, the Times has had in the past few days an article or two highlighting the challenges of bus drivers and transit workers and operators within the system. And it's really heart-wrenching, and it's really worth a read just to see how their lives are impacted. But of course, that leads to the challenges of running enough trains and overcrowding, not in the traditional sense necessarily, but even in the sense of just so many people that you can't properly maintain the 6 feet social distancing guidelines that are out there for everyone to try to follow. What is New York City Transit trying to do in order to meet those needs and to keep people safe, both personally and just from whether it's in the reality of safe and the perception of feeling safe, because everyone also has different comfort levels as well.
Okay. So, I mean, the amount of service that is run is the amount of service that can be run right now in light of our staffing challenges. As you saw, you know, these things sort of evolve, and as the days go by, there's lessons learned from the previous day, you know, like with regards to your question about, you know, the closing of the system. Like I said, I had the number wrong. It was over 1,000 NYPD officers part of the effort to close the system last night, as well as MTA police officers were also assisting. And then there's, you know, our staff, you know, who with their PPE, you know, make every effort. It's impossible to There's 475 stations, so it's impossible to have an eye on every location. But what I can tell you is that where we can lock and prevent, access to the system, it's locked and there's a prevention and people are not allowed into the system. Where there's not, we'll have to, as time goes on, work on seeing what that's like. We didn't experience that problem last night. So that lesson learned hasn't really presented itself yet. But as we go forward, I'm sure that we'll discover that there'll be reports of people kind of roaming around, and NYPD will have to respond, and then they'll have to come up with a plan to kind of address that. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it with regard to the closed stations. Now, with social distancing, so far we're doing pretty good. I mean, last night with the essential services that we were running, there really wasn't an issue with that. And as you saw, bus drivers have now we have all door boarding on the buses to allow people to enter through the back of the bus as opposed through past the bus driver. And we ask people to properly social distance. Where it's not possible, it's not possible. I mean, as time goes on and our staff begins to kind of come back, we will be able to run more service and that will be helpful. But right now, the message is that if you're not an essential employee in the city of New York and you're not going to, a doctor's appointment, that is required, we're asking you to stay home. That's part of our messaging, because we can't do it all. We can't take someone from a seat and say, okay, you move over there. It just doesn't work. So we're asking people to do their part and we're going to do our part.
Yeah, Craig, let's take some questions probably for Marcus, because then, then Colleen can present and we can take questions. Now, the way we do it in our committee is we ask for questions from the public first and then board members. And as you see, there'll be, if you click on participants, there'll be where it says raise hand. And if any members of the public want to be heard, they should raise their hand. And the one caveat I'll say is that I can generally not see in the column of names that I have all of the names. And so I'm going to ask Will how many hands are there, and we'll call on them, depending on how many hands are there. So are there any members of the public that would like to comment or ask a question of Marcus Book from New York City Transit? If there are.
Right now, there are no members of the public. You have Lori Boris, Valerie Mason from the board, and Jordan Roku is a public member of this committee.
Right, I do see. So why don't we?
Okay, great.
Why don't we go to those? Why don't we go to Lori first? Lori, if you have a question, so why don't you unmute Lori?
Hi. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Marcus. First of all, I want to say that I really think that the MTA is doing like a remarkable job, and it takes a lot for me to say that, but I think that the MTA is doing a really good job considering the circumstances. I have a question about revenue, actually, because as you said, you're allowing people to get on the buses, from all of the entrances. And so that means basically that like the buses are free, they're running free now. And the only change in that would be if people are riding on the select buses, and because then they would, in theory anyway, get a little ticket. So my question is, what is the MTA doing to try and take care of this situation? I mean, it's just, what are you doing for the revenue? And also, are the people who get on the buses to check those tags, are they considered essential? Are they doing their job now? I mean, like, what's just talk to me a little bit about, you know, how the MTA is dealing with revenue issues.
Okay. So regarding revenue, what's occurring right now is a very, very fluid situation. The governor requested funding from the federal government, and we got some funding, and we've asked for additional funding to support the MTA. Right now, because the situation is so fluid, there is not a way to do revenue collection in a safe fashion to protect everyone. So we are really just in sort of emergency mode. We haven't come out of that yet, you know, and there hasn't been a lot of time to really think about the revenue. We just know that we need funding to maintain the system. We're requesting it. We've received some, and we're continuing to request it. And for the minutia of our funding situation, it's my suggestion is to just tune in or request to speak at the next board meeting, because that's where the discussion is taking place. It's been a very open and public conversation about MTA funding. And from the operational end, I can just say we are in emergency mode right now, which is basically to continue to get essential workers to and from their places of work and to keep people moving.
Okay.
I think,
Thank
Lori,
you.
it's fair to say, Lori, that the MTA is in serious trouble since the ridership has decreased by about 90% or so.
Yeah.
And I think
92%.
92%, sorry. And I think unless there's federal help coming, it's going to be a big issue.
Yeah.
And we're all going to have some trouble here, but hopefully there will be.
Okay.
Valerie Mason, Will, why don't you unmute Valerie? I see Valerie there.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Valerie.
It's basically a two-part question. I mean, I think that the MTA workers are doing an amazing job. I mean, they were the first responders who really got hit the hardest by the coronavirus of all, you know, police, et cetera. My question really has to do with their safety. I mean, all of the pictures that we're seeing of them cleaning these subway cars, I have to say, the mode that of what is being done is very rudimentary and almost like, you know, you would be cleaning your kitchen. I'm a little surprised by the rather, you know, 1950s methods that we have for cleaning the subway. I mean, first of all, the workers aren't even in most of them are not even in hazmat suits. I've seen that some of them don't even have masks on. And I just think they're being put in a really precarious position. But secondly, from the methodology that I'm seeing being used to clean these cars, I have to say I'm not getting 100% confidence that they're really truly being disinfected. So that's my first question about, is the MTA going, and I realize that there's a budgetary you know, rub here, but what kind of methods are we using to actually clean these cars? And the second part of my question is, do you foresee the MTA banning food and drink from coming into the subway like it used to be, to keep these cars as clean as possible for the future?
Okay, so regarding the employees, if you see video or you know, on television that an employee is not wearing a mask, that employee should be, they're all instructed to wear masks. I wish, and I think they wish, that they had hazmat suits. But as you can see, the country can't even figure out how to get standard personal protection masks for people who are caring for COVID patients. So hazmat suits is a lot to ask. But I'll tell you, the methods that they're using to clean the subway right now are really what's available and what was available when this crisis hit. But with each week, you know, we discover some new stuff and new things are tried out. So they're using traditional squirt bottles to spray disinfectant, electrostatic sprayers, okay, which is, you've probably seen. There's not a lot of video of that, but they do have the sprayers to disinfect the interior of the cars. They're using antimicrobial biostats are being used in sprayers as well to address it. And we're also looking to begin a pilot to utilize UV light and to have this antimicrobial material placed into the subway to kind of coat it so that the COVID virus cannot really live there, you know, because right now we have an open surface, it gets on it, and it's an open question as to how long it stays there and how long it can live there, but we're trying to get ahead of that. So as the industry and the industries provide more material, and everyone is reaching out to us with new ways to go about doing this the sanitizing, and we're trying it. You know, last night was the first night that we really kind of shut everything down and had an opportunity to see what it's like to actually clean every car, you know, and what that takes. And so with each day, with each week, it's going to get better. But, you know, right now we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Oh, no, I appreciate that greatly. I'm just more concerned for the health and well-being of the people that are down there and actually doing it, because it seems like it's very precarious.
Tough situation, Valerie.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
And
Valerie. Jordan Woke, you had a question? Unmute Jordan, Will.
I
Right,
think
Jordan?
Valerie hadn't finished her point. I don't know if you want to go back to
Yeah,
it.
I saw Valerie was trying to speak a little more, and I know
I
she had
didn't
two
think so.
questions. And
I
I yield my time to Valerie Mason.
Valerie, did you want to say anything?
Valerie, you're still
One more
muted.
thing. I see one more thing.
So,
One
yeah,
more second,
unmute
Valerie.
so
Yeah,
speak to it.
sorry. And my second question about banning food and drink
Oh.
and other things in the subway as we go forward.
Okay. Great question, Valerie. And I'm going to take that back because that is the first time I've heard that question asked. And I think when we return to the system in the days to come, things will be a little different. But I will
Hopefully.
I hope so too. So I will take that back, and you know, I can get that answer. I can shoot that answer to Will tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Valerie. Sorry.
And
Jordan, you wanna go
before we move on, I think we should take a minute or two and join in the 7 o'clock applause.
Yes.
We had this very funny clap.
Yes, okay.
For the MTA
This is our
workers
boy right
also.
Right.
The nurses, Harry, Hannah.
Freeland, he's not here right
The
now.
nurses.
Third away.
Thank you very much.
So
Well done.
Upper East Side. Hi, Miss.
Hi,
Danny
Schneider.
Harris's.
What are we doing? Those are nice lines.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. I think
I'm going to mute everybody, and it'll include our co-chairs for a second, and I'll unmute everybody who was speaking. Sorry.
Did they take it down to silence?
okay. So you.
I don't think so.
There we go. 1 second.
Will. All right. Thank you, Will.
Yeah.
Jordan, you want to? Do you still want to comment? Yes, he still does. Why don't you unmute Jordan?
Jordan.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Hi, Marcus. It's not as great a disguise as you probably wanted it to be. Now, I observe that many of the routes take much less time to travel for the buses. And so I assume that there's less equipment that needs to be out there. So related question is, why are we still running the very long buses? Unless they're cheaper to run than the short buses, I would assume you've got more short buses available. Are all the garages being used because there's so many fewer trips being done? And how about shorter trains to use less energy if they aren't being filled up? So shorter buses, fewer garages, shorter trains.
Okay, all the garages are being utilized. I mean, there's still maintenance to be done on vehicles. Shorter trains, it's a great, both shorter trains and shorter buses is an interesting idea. But again, we have the delicate balance of trying to ensure that there is enough room for everyone to properly social distance. So yes, it may be saving, energy and cost, but right now we want to make sure that when a bus arrives, that they're not getting on a bus that is too crowded for them to be comfortable. So it kind of makes sense to have the Arctics out there to give people as much room as they possibly can have to social distance while this is going on.
I would just say that as a bus planner myself in Westchester and dealing with these issues, the biggest generator of complaints right now is overcrowded buses and why can't you run all articulated buses? And I think that's a really important issue in wherever it is possible. Of course, it can't do it everywhere based on different roadway constraints and operator constraints and such, but wherever you could run the bigger vehicles to be able to better socially distance, it's the time to do it, at least in my opinion. And that's a transit best practice. I know that New York City Transit, as Marcus said, is probably doing the same thing as much as possible, but that would be something that I would hope continues to the fullest extent possible, because it is something that would provide more peace of mind for passengers.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Next, Barbara Rutter. Barbara, you had a comment?
Yes.
Could you unmute Barbara, Will?
Am I unmuted?
Barbara, yeah,
Go
you're
ahead,
good.
Barbara, you're up.
I'm very happy with that response, because I was going to say almost the opposite. I hear from my doorman, I have not been on public transportation, but hear from my doorman and from what I see on television, not only the trains crowded, but people are not wearing masks. And this is a matter of life and death if you believe what the scientists are telling us at the time. What could we do to make sure that people, not the workers, but the people on the train, in fact, do wear masks? Is there any sort of campaign? I know the governor's daughter is going to start a campaign, but what can you do to maybe make announcements or things like that? I think it's for the safety reasons.
Okay, I think that what we're doing, there are a few campaigns within New York City Transit talking about covering up and the necessity for face masks. But I really think that with regard to messaging, I don't think the messaging can be any stronger right now on this kind of issue. And you're right, this is about life and death and the safety of all involved. And Barbara, I think that we're doing our level best right now, short of having, a police officer. And I think that PD will actually, if they see someone without a mask, not eject them from the system, but certainly request that they put on some face covering. And if they're not complying, then I think they'd probably stay on a train and ask them to leave the system and go get it. And then they can come back on the system. But you, of course, need PD presence to be, to see it, observe it. And that's the way I believe it's working.
Okay, thank you. Next, Felice Farber. Felice, do you have a question?
So I'd just like to thank you and commend all of the MTA workers for all their hard work and keeping the trains running for essential workers during this time has been really critical for the city. I'm just wondering, for the one night so far of providing replacement bus service, how well did that work? Were there many people who availed themselves of it? I mean, because that really, the people who are still riding at that time are also probably essential workers needing to get to work or get home from their jobs.
Okay, yes, good question. Just give me 1 second. So like I said, regarding we ran a robust service last night. We added about 1,168 additional trips and at a 76% increase. And we added about 344 more buses. There are about 11,000 based on what we've seen over this period of time of ridership during those hours between 1 and 5. They're about 9 to, why are you laughing, Craig? 9 to 11,000 people.
My son's walking behind me, so.
Who ride the system in the overnights. And we probably served of those 11,000, a little over 6,000 or 7,000 people. So we had ample capacity for the people who use the system in the overnights, albeit they had to do it via bus as opposed to the subway. And then those who didn't have bus service available, if that wasn't viable, we provided a car service connector to those. And what they did is they went online at mta.info, essential services, and they basically put in an application which basically says, this is my shift, these are the hours that I work, and I'm going from this place to this place. And it was determined whether or not they qualified for a car service connector. But most of the people, the majority of the people, utilize the buses. And the criteria for the car connector was either, more than 3 transfers on a bus or more than 1 hour and 20 minutes in travel time. So if their travel time was more than 1 hour and 20 minutes, or they had to transfer 3 times, they became eligible for the connector service. Other than that, they utilized the existing beefed up bus service that we provided.
Chuck, before we move on to other questions, just a general announcement. Colleen has to leave the meeting by 7:50. So I see 3 more members who have their hands up. If we could just try to go through those questions quickly and see if we can, at 7:15, move to Colleen. I think that would be.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to do that. Yeah. Okay. Peter Borak, I think, is next. Peter.
Great. Thanks so much, Marcus. Really appreciate you speaking with us tonight. So my question is actually something you touched on earlier and something Chuck also touched on, which is the dire financial state that the MTA is in and is going to be in when this is all done. What can the community board do, if anything, to try and help alleviate that? Can we be writing letters or sending emails or making phone calls to try and get some federal funding in? Obviously, you said that we can go and speak to the board, but the board doesn't have any money. The board needs money from other sources. So what can we as the citizens of New York do to try and help the MTA now that it needs our help?
Yeah, thank you. I think that, yes, I mean, certainly reaching out to your elected officials in the state Senate and the Assembly and expressing your desire and need for them to provide the necessary funding. Interesting political times in Washington right now. I think the needs are really clear. I don't think there's any ambiguity as to the needs of our transportation system and a lot of other industries, including hospitals. So I think the need is there, but certainly a letter writing campaign to the Senate and to the Assembly would be helpful. I think Governor Cuomo has done his best to continue to request the necessary funds, but the more pressure, the better. Appreciate it.
Good, thank you. Billy Freeland, Billy, unmute Billy, Will.
Great. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks for all you're doing. Just on the Essential Connector program, the for-hire vehicle program, has there been any consideration given to using yellow cabs instead of your typical black cars? I know we've talked here in this committee a lot about how beleaguered the yellow cab industry is. This seems like a great opportunity to somewhat subsidize yellow cabs while also making the program as effective as it can be. Thanks.
So absolutely, there's been discussions, and I think discussions are ongoing. Like I said, this is a fluid situation, and with each day, we are meeting with more people, and I believe that we're in discussions with the city and discussion with TLC to try to incorporate yellow cabs into the situation. I don't think that's been finalized. There's been no announcement made, but I know that there's probably been discussions going on every day, to kind of make this service as viable, effective, and useful, for those who are traveling in the overnights as possible. And if that includes yellow cabs, that will be what we do.
Good, thank you. And last but not least, Rita Popper. Can we unmute Rita?
Rita, you're unmuted.
Hi. In preparation for this meeting, I did take a very short ride on a bus. And I want you to be aware that 50% of the bus, starting from the driver back to the articulation, is roped off. So there isn't as much room on a bus as there used to be. And Marcus, I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you. Okay, so I wasn't aware of that, Rita. I wasn't aware that on our ticks that they had shortened the distance that much. It could possibly be based on what they've observed in terms of the ridership that's out there and who's been using the bus on a daily basis. But I will mention that. And Rita, did you find that it prevented people from social distancing on the bus?
It didn't prevent, it happened to be a very empty bus and people were sitting like at every other seat. There were only about 4 people on the bus. I just did it as a test to see what was going on. But a good portion of the bus is not usable, which is why when somebody said shorter buses, we wouldn't have any bus.
Right. Okay. So I mean, I think that's just the cordoning off up to the articulation is just probably an abundance of caution for the driver, who we actually really need to show up to work to keep that bus riding. And I believe, and I will check on this though, I believe that in the event that there are people boarding the bus and it becomes a situation where it gets difficult to social distance, I'm almost sure that that driver's instructed to go back there and remove that and shorten that distance.
Say that it's not the full, it is the first segment of the bus up to the articulate. Only 50% of that first segment is usable.
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you, Rita. Listen, I see that Sharon has her hand up, but I think we need to move on to get Colleen because her time is limited, and Sharon will maybe, if there's time afterwards, we can, if Marcus is still available, we can spend a couple minutes on that. So I'd like to call on,
if Sharon can actually send her question to Will and pass it along, then we may have the opportunity to
send it.
Pass it along.
Get it right. Send it. Use the chat feature, Sharon, and send it to Will, and we'll get it to Marcus, and he can then maybe get an answer back. I'd like to call on Colleen Chattergoon now, who's our DOT liaison, and she's usually meetings, and it's nice to see Colleen remotely. And
thanks.
Why don't we unmute Colleen?
All right, I'm gonna mute Marcus. Thanks, Marcus.
Okay,
and I'm finding Colleen. And Colleen, now you're unmuted.
Great, thank you, Will. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Colleen Chattergoon from City DOT. Just to let you know, I'm not running away from your meeting. I was personally impacted with COVID-19. I lost a young cousin 2 weeks ago, and she was cremated today. And she leaves behind 2 young daughters. One is 12 and the other is 7. So the 7-year-old is with me, and thank God she's okay. But the 12-year-old, she has it, and she's recovering with her dad. So we're very happy about that. MTA, you're doing an amazing job. I'm so glad that we are working together. I never thought that we would be living in such trying times where you have an evil virus that's lurking around that killed so many wonderful people and took so many lives in an untimely manner. But to let you know what the New York City DOT is doing, we've had at least over 100 employees infected with COVID. And I believe we had about less than 7 individuals who passed away, which is unfortunate because Most of these individuals worked for the agency for 30 years, and they put in a lot of time and effort. And for them to enjoy their retirement, you know, they passed away and they leave behind families. When COVID came out, we were inundated with a lot of requests from the hospitals to provide doctors parking. Lo and behold, we were able to act fast with working with the New York Greater Hospitals, where we issued hundreds of parking permits to doctors and nurses who were coming in from, you know, different states and who lived in New York City, who did not have, you know, parking permits to park on the streets. And we allowed a lot of these parking to occur in areas where there were loading zones, commercial loading zones. And of course, if you had your parking permit, you didn't have to pay for the Muni meter. The other thing that we did is that most of you have heard about the Open Streets initiative that the mayor announced along with Speaker Johnson. And that is something that we are working closely with community boards, bids, and block associations. And we send guidelines to the community boards asking for information about, you know, streets that we should consider. And I know we did receive a resolution from Community Board 8 about Park Avenue. Just wanted to let you know that we got a lot of email from residents who are not happy with the choice of Park Avenue being an open street. And Borough Commissioner Pinkar was really busy responding to a lot of residents who reached out to him. But we're more than happy to work with the board to identify a lot of streets that are, you know, feasible based on the guidelines that we sent out for open streets. The other thing is that a lot of our non-essential workers, just like myself, we are working from home, we're teleworking. Our essential workers, such as our inspectors, they're the ones who are out there doing the work, which is responding to construction sites, noisy construction sites, a noisy manhole cover. We are on a rotational basis system because, you know, we don't want an individual to come in, you know, 5 days a week. It could be 2 or 3 days a week. And, you know, again, it's a rotational system. So we do have our inspectors who are on site and who are working. Our borough engineer is working as well. Borough engineer is the division that replaces signs, parking signs, and install them. And they're the ones who get all the complaints about missing signs. So they are working and they are repairing, issuing repair orders of missing signs. The other thing is that, as Mark has mentioned, and which a lot of agencies are going to be impacted, is their budgetary cuts. Our budget is definitely going to be affected with COVID-19. And right now, what we are doing, what we're looking at, we're focusing on priority projects. And projects are, our capital divisions are reviewing those lists. So what identified the priority projects in a lot of the community boards, we will share that with the community boards. And let's see, the important thing right now is the open streets. And the reason why I say open streets is important, it's because we would like New Yorkers to come out and have the ability to get exercise, to come out and do their groceries, and at the same time do the social distancing. The open street concept is not like a pedestrian plaza concept where there will be tables and chairs. We're not providing that. We would like people to come out and do their social distancing safe, where they are not congregating in large crowds. So we're hoping that this will become successful and would lead us to the opening of other areas and gradually enable us to go back to work in our office. I don't know when that will be, to be honest with you. Realistically, I don't know when that is going to be, because as most of you know, I've been listening to the governor's update every morning, as well as Mayor de Blasio. They want to do this in a way where it's done safe or safely. And I know the governor is not looking to open New York City right away, or all of these businesses. It has to be done on a progression, step-by-step basis where it's safe to do so. And, you know, we're just trying to keep safe, And I'm glad that most of you are here with, you know, on the Zoom, or all of you. I'm glad all of you are here on this Zoom. And, you know, if you have any questions, just feel free to go ahead and ask me.
Colleen, thank you, and I'm glad you're feeling better, and I know you have a difficult situation there, so whenever you have to leave, you obviously can leave. Are there any questions from members of the public for Colleen? T questions?
It's a reminder to raise your hand through the participants feature at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, hit *9 to raise your hand.
Anything there, Will, that you see?
I don't see anything. We do have 3 board members who've raised their hand.
Right. I can see them actually. So Valerie, Valerie Mason, why don't we unmute Valerie?
Thank you, Colleen. I'm very, very sorry for your loss. We've been impacted as well, and it's a terrible thing. And I really feel for you and your family.
Thank you, Valerie.
Let me just say, your comments about Park Avenue, are you trying to delicately say that that's off the table? Because I mean, I understand that some of the residents on Park Avenue are against it, but I've been out every weekend walking up and down Park Avenue, and there are almost no one in those buildings. And those streets are really wide and have been subject to the open streets program every summer. It doesn't mean that they have to be open 24/7, but having been in Central Park both this weekend and the weekend before, I mean, it would really be selfish of the people who live along those avenues not to allow them to be open for other people on the Upper East Side and for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think their fears are unfounded about people picnicking on the meridians in the middle. And I would really urge, if Ed needs support from neighborhood associations, et cetera, East 72nd Street Neighborhood Association is very much in favor of opening up Park Avenue, not 24/7, but along the time that people can actually use it and feel that they can exercise and move freely. Thanks.
Sure, Valerie, my condolences to you as well and your family with what you're going through. And it's not to say that we are against it. It's just that we got quite a few emails from residents who have concerns with the having Park Avenue as an open streets. And I know we are evaluating the letter and the requests that we received. So we will get back to the community board just to let you know. I mean, we have to respond to everybody who reaches out to us with the resolution that was passed. So I think we're being very open-minded, just to let you know. Yeah.
Before we move
And I will let Ed know. I will share with him your comments that, not everybody is against this, and there are associations that would like to see this happen, definitely.
Before we move on to the next speaker or the next member who has a question, first of all, I just want to send my condolences, Colleen. I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't imagine what that must be like. Can you just further elaborate on what the open streets mean? So I live on East End Avenue, and I was among the first people to use East End's open street this past weekend. And to me, I describe it more like a shared street where it's not a complete closure. Everything still take place in terms of vehicular movements, just they are restricted to go 5 miles an hour. So taxis and deliveries can still pull up to front doors on East End Avenue. People can still retrieve their cars. It's not as if there's complete lack of access. It's that pedestrians are sharing the street with vehicles, and vehicles must yield the right of way to pedestrians.
Sure. So let me tell you, open streets are simple closures of streets to vehicles and do not feature any programming, seating, or other elements that might encourage gathering. The iteration of this program is to add back certain amenities and programmatic elements when it's safe to do so. So you're absolutely right. I mean, the closures may not be implemented on a truck or bus route or emergency route. It's limited access to emergency needs and retrieve parking vehicles. So you're absolutely right. It's more of a shared, kind of like a shared street concept. Yes.
Okay. The next, Tricia Shimamura, why don't we mute Tricia. Well,
Hi, everybody. Colleen, I echo everything that's already been said. I'm hoping that you guys are finding some peace and staying healthy as much as possible. I just wanted to add that we also live near East End, and we're able to take advantage of that area this weekend. It was honestly a huge relief, and if you are taking feedback back to DOT, we have a stroller. We've been unable to use the Esplanade just because it's too crowded and just not safe to walk on right now, and not in my opinion safe to when at the height of 70-degree weather outside, when everybody's outside kind of breathing down on everybody and not wearing masks. So it was a huge relief to be able to use East End Avenue and to have space to walk around, not be worried about my baby or us. My one question for you to look at was when we were walking north and looking on East End and looking at 86th Street, it seems that some cars were trying to turn and were not aware of the situation, and it made me a little nervous. I was wondering if you could just have somebody take a look, or if you could just make sure that there is appropriate signage warning people early, warning drivers early that excuse me, East End is kind of is closed, or however you are phrasing it right now, just to make sure. I saw 2 cars in the 10 minutes I was there turn and then make a weird U-turn in the space, and people were trying to wave them off and show them to turn around. So we could just make sure that the signage was there. But it was truly a relief to find an area to get a little space to move around and get a little air. So thank you.
Sure, we'll take a look at that. And that's East End and 86th Street, right?
East End and 86th Street. It was 86th Street, obviously a big corridor, and we had I saw 2 cars in the 10 minutes we were there.
Sure, I'll talk to our borough engineer tomorrow to see what signage we can put out there.
Okay, thank you so much.
thanks, Tricia. Next is Michelle Birnbaum. Can we unmute Michelle? Go ahead, Michelle, I think.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm happy to hear about those of you who are doing well, and very sad to hear about those of you who have had very sad things happen. So I wish you well in these very hard times. Let me say this. First of all, I don't think anybody should be presumptuous enough to say how many people are or are not in residence on Park Avenue at this time from 59th Street to 96th Street, since that corridor houses thousands and thousands of people, all of whom most of those buildings have doctors' offices on their entry floors with accessorides and cars for hire and everything pulling up. They also are completely dependent on the delivery services, because these days the delivery services are doing dozens and dozens and dozens of boxes to each building. And to presume you could have a FedEx or an Amazon on a side street and take his hand card and make multiple visits to a building to do deliveries is really not feasible. Having said that, however, I just want to make a comment about this. In my opinion, one of the reasons that this open streets concept has come upon us is because you were noting extreme crowding in the parks. Now, with the playgrounds being closed, there's really no reason, if you want to take a walk, to be in a park or on a promenade. The streets, the sidewalks are actually empty. And I think that public service announcements should go out mainly for people to stay in when they can, but if they feel the need to go out and take a stroll, to stay on their approximate blocks. So if you live near Park, you would walk on Park and whatever your side street is. If you live on First, if you live near Second, wherever you live, encouraging people to go to a participant street is actually inviting just as much crowding. The message should be stay in your own area. You don't have to go to a park to walk. You can walk wherever you are, and you should stay where you are. There's no reason to go ahead and inconvenience the residents of whatever streets you're choosing to close, because it doesn't provide any extra space to anybody. Plus the fact it's an additional burden on the DOT that now has to put signage at every, if it's a north-south street that you're closing, they have to put signage, protective signage, as per Tricia's comments, on every east-west street. So you're asking the DOT to go out in these times when they're shorthanded anyway, and go out and place all these signs for safety's sake, so that cars don't turn into those streets. All in all, I think it is a bad idea. I think it came from a good place. I think it was an attempt at a solution, but I think the rationality of it really doesn't make any sense. When the sidewalks are empty, there's no reason to encourage people to go to one specific location.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Next, Barbara Rutter. Can we unmute Barbara?
Barbara, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I have to say, I do go out for walks. I went out last weekend and I won't go out on a nice weekend again. It was really scary. Michelle, the streets are not empty. And what we opening up a street such as East End will do is and more room at some of our local streets also. We cannot in any easy way socially distant. It is impossible. Streets are narrow, side streets are narrow, 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue, 3rd Avenue are narrow also. And even if I don't go to Park Avenue, those streets that are nearer to me would be a little bit more empty. The advantage of Park Avenue is not only are they much wider than even East End, the actual streets themselves, but East End and Park Avenue, as far as I know, are the only 2 streets that don't have buses running on them. When we have a street fair and we close out 3rd Avenue, 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, it makes a total mess with DOT. Park Avenue and East End are, to me, are the 2 most logical streets to do, and it will mean people are going to go out. I speak to lots of people. I am a person of age that they talk about of being the dangerous thing. And I've asked lots of scientists and doctors whether it's safe for me to go out, and it's encouraged if you do it safely. I want to go out. I want to do it safely. And we don't have, there's no reason why we can't open up streets that are logical streets to open up.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Next is our board chair, and we're always happy to see her at our meeting, Alita Camp.
Thank you so much, Chuck. I'll be very brief. I just want to extend the community board's condolences to Colleen. It's been a terribly tragic time, and it becomes even more poignant when we know someone who's been so personally affected. The other thing I'd like to say is that the parks are congested. CB8 is the densest area in the city with the least green space. So I really urge you to come up with any alternative to the overcrowding that exists in the park. And thank you for the
Thank you, Lita. And you know what? You're absolutely right. The parks are overcrowded. When I saw what happened last weekend in the park, I was shocked. And people were not social distancing, and people did not have masks on. It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary.
It is, and that's why we have been in favor of opening, the board has been in favor of opening streets.
And
if there's anything,
yeah,
even for short distances to alleviate the pressure.
And a lot of community boards in Manhattan share your sentiments. So
I know that, and thank you.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Next, Roberta Dangor, would you have Roberta?
Rebecca.
Go ahead, Roberta.
Hi.
I mean, Rebecca.
Again, it's okay.
I know.
Again, Colleen, I just want to send my condolences and that we're thinking of you. It's unimaginable, all of the loss that we're feeling. But I think a lot of the upset about Park Avenue was also lack of kind of the community's voice in our decision. And I think we desperately need more open space. And maybe it's having another transportation committee meeting before our full board to give a platform for people in the community to voice their concerns about each area as to whether or not it should be opened. But I think as long as we show that we're really engaging with everyone, all of our residents here, maybe there won't be as much blowback on certain decisions. So that's just my
Thank you,
thought on
Rebecca.
this.
Thank you.
Valerie Mason hasn't spoken on this. I don't think she spoke before, but why don't we unmute Valerie?
I'm
Valerie,
sorry, but I just want to respond to what Michelle was saying. As far as I'm concerned, the streets of the Upper East Side belong to everyone in this city. And to say that you would be restricted to walk on the blocks upon which you live, I'm flabbergasted by that comment. You may think that it's presumptuous to say that, you know, there are not that many people living along Park Avenue, but I happen to walk up and down Park Avenue every night, and I can see, and I'm not talking about 9 o'clock at night, I'm talking about 7. And we're not asking, as Colleen mentioned, for the streets to be closed 100% of the time, but to say that you're restricted to the street on which you live, I don't find that to be a very friendly comment. And Michelle, I can't believe that you really meant that.
Let's not, Valerie, I don't think we should get into a whole back and forth on this.
Okay.
But I understand your comment. Tricia, you had further comment? We don't want to string this out too long because I know Colleen has to go shortly. Go ahead, Tricia, unmute
Yeah,
Tricia.
I'm just gonna add very briefly. I do think that I think that we should also just keep in mind that just how complicated some of our blocks are. I just want to say that I live right next to a nursing home and a major hospital, many major hospitals, and on the other side is First, which is just full of bars that are having a lot of people congregating there, and that's like something else maybe the transportation committee can discuss. But truly, we can't walk our block. It's just not safe at all to walk our block right now. Last night we had to go out and get groceries and diapers, and we ended up walking in the middle of the street on First, which was so terribly scary, but we had to because everybody was congregating underneath the scaffolding along First. So to get to the Dwayne Reed or whatever we were going to, it was the safest way to go. So there was just no way for our block, at least on 72nd Street, for people to safely walk out and about. So I would just ask that when we think about these places, and I know that no street would be ideal, we should be really thinking about just how difficult it is. Particularly, we do have the lowest amount of open space, but we also have a lot of hospitals, and those are the areas that people are trying to rightfully avoid right now.
Thank you, Tricia. I think we should call a halt to this particular item, unless Colleen, do you have anything further that you wanted to add here?
No, I think that's, I'm good. I think you had an item on the agenda for Queensboro Bridge bicycle lane.
Yes.
Just to touch on, yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Before you moved on from that, it appears Lo was trying to raise his hand, but couldn't figure it out. Would you like me to?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
You want to make a comment? I can see you, Lo. Do you want to make a comment? Raise your hand. Yes. Okay. Why don't you unmute Lo? He wasn't. Go ahead.
He's unmuted now.
Okay, Lo, go ahead.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Will. And I'm sorry I'm so incompetent at managing the Zoom. I just want to second what Rebecca said earlier, that it would be good to have another transportation meeting that's well announced, that allows for a broader participation. A lot of Park Avenue residents are not that conversant in Zoom. I mean, Zooming is a real barrier to public input and public participation. You just have to realize that. And so I think there are many issues. I think the time frame 8 to 8 is far too broad. I think there's room for a pilot program. I think, I think there are concerns also in Carnegie Hill and elsewhere that no one should be walking on the malls, because that is very difficult to maintain. And we spent something like $200,000 a year that we collect from our buildings to help keep that up and keep the flowers going, but also the grass. It's very hard to grow grass. So I think, and also the access of the buildings, because you're going to be essentially closing off every block that comes into Park Avenue. So you're really closing from Madison to Lexington, because if it's one way, you've got to back up. You got to back up your car to get out of the block because you can't go forward once you hit Park. And so you really are inconveniencing a lot of space. And I think there's something to be said that maybe the weekends are the proper time for this. So I think there are a number of important issues and questions and that we should look into.
Thank you, Lo. I don't know, Colleen, I don't know if you want to comment about how traffic on the side streets is impacted by these closures or not.
Well, I mean, right now traffic is minimal. I mean, right now it's very minimal. And I mean, whatever decision the board decides to take, whether it's to have a second meeting, that's up to you all to do that. But traffic is minimal right now. There's not much out there.
And even during summer streets, crosstown traffic was not restricted. That you can still get through Park Avenue, even if Park Avenue itself was closed. And summer streets had a more strict shutdown as opposed to open streets, because open streets do allow vehicles to make deliveries and to have vehicles do pickups and drop-offs of passengers in front of their buildings.
Yeah, which summer streets did not allow that. Yeah. Before I go, I know you have the Queensboro Bridge on your agenda, and just to let you know, given the circumstances and what's going on, we're not able to do anything at the moment. We would want the rehabilitation work to be completed first, and then we're going to reevaluate the bike lane.
All right, so Colleen, just to be clear, our discussion isn't necessarily only going to focus on the bike lane on the South Outer Roadway. I think we're talking more generalities in terms of potential short-term
improvements,
bike access or improved bike pedestrian access to get us through the time. Obviously, you're not going to be able to hear this, but this is being recorded and you will be able to view the discussion. And we'll work with you going forward, depending on whatever our outcome may be.
All right, great. So it's short term with what's going on. I will raise that.
Yeah, and Lo, getting to your other comment, we'll discuss whether we should have another hearing. This is going to go on obviously for a while. I don't think and our next meeting is the beginning of June, and we'll decide if we want to have a further discussion, not just necessarily about Park Avenue, but I mean about the closure of streets in general. On this, so people have an opportunity to come and be heard on these things. But thanks everybody. Then I think we ought to move on to the next item on our agenda. And Colleen, thank you very much. And
thank you all.
Sorry for all.
Colleen.
And by the way, the presentation on Revel is amazing. It's really good. They're doing great work, just so you know.
Well, with that as an introduction, we'll go to item 2, which is a presentation by Revel, a new service north of 65th Street to accommodate healthcare providers. And I know we have Carol Antonez, and I don't know if we have someone else, but why don't you go ahead and start your presentation? I know you have things that are going to be put on the screen so everybody can see.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carol Antunes, and I'm here with Revel, and our general manager, Lauren Rees, is also on the call.
Go ahead, Carol.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us today. We really appreciate it. I would ask for a show of hands of who's heard of Revel before or have seen them on the streets already, but yeah, maybe if you guys just want to wave on who's heard of us before. Okay, a couple hands.
Clap in the reactions button.
Yeah, exactly. So that works too. So we'll go through our PowerPoint and give you kind of a brief overview of us as a company, who we are, how we like to show up in communities and interact with community boards like yours, and then also a little bit about the service itself, and then what we've been doing since coronavirus hit our city as well. So to start at the beginning, I suppose, our company is born and bred in Brooklyn, and now we're in 4 boroughs and a couple of other cities as well. But a New York company from the beginning. Our 2 co-founders traveled a lot in Europe, and they worked in the transportation sector, and they kept seeing kind of electric mopeds really being a fundamental part of city fabric in other cities like Paris, in India, in Europe, other cities in Europe, in Latin America as well. And they thought, wouldn't this be really cool and handy to have in Brooklyn? And so in 2018, they started with a small pilot of just 68 mopeds, and worked on it for about 10 months and realized that there was actually opportunity for this here. And so in June of 2019, this past June, we expanded in a much bigger way of 1,000 mopeds from Astoria down to Sunset Park. And I'll go into this a little bit later as well, but it really proved that there was a huge demand for a lightweight product like this in our city. A very flexible mode of transportation that allows people to get around quickly and easily. So a little bit about us as a company, we really want to seamlessly integrate into the city. We don't view ourselves as a disruptor at all. If you see them, they're relatively quiet, they're electric, they kind of zoom by, they park in the street, they operate in the street. There's no kind of gray area there. They're not in bike lanes, they're not on highways or sidewalks. They also park in kind of legal parking spots. So they only need 3 feet of dead space. And that's really important. So there's no docks, there's no dedicated parking spaces. We understand that that's a surefire way to kind of not ingratiate yourself in a community is to take their parking. And so we're not trying to do that at all. They just kind of squeeze in, kind of like how you'll see a motorcycle parked between 2 cars in dead space. The service itself is cheaper than rideshare services. It is 31 cents a minute, $1 to unlock. And so it's a relatively affordable way to get around. It's more expensive than a subway ride, but it's definitely cheaper than Uber or Lyft. And as I mentioned, it's also 100% electric as well.
So in order to drive Revel, you must be at least 21 years old. This is just a company policy because we believe that it's really important to have the safest drivers on the road. And you must have a valid driver's license because of the type of vehicle the moped falls under. We don't require a motorcycle license, but you must have a driver's license. Each moped comes with 2 DOT approved helmets in the back, a larger one and a smaller one. And you're absolutely covered by third-party liability insurance. And this is not something that you must opt into. The second that you start a Revel ride, you're automatically covered by the insurance, which is pretty great. And there's no way that you could really speed on these mopeds. They're throttled at 29 miles per hour, which allows them to keep up with city traffic, but also will not allow for excessive speeding. And it all works through the app. So the app is the key to the moped. So you go on like the Apple store or whatever store you have, you download the Revel app and you kind of apply for the service. So you'll need a couple of things. Your driver's license will ask for a selfie to verify that you're the person that will be operating the vehicle, a debit or credit card. We'll do a check to make sure that the license is not suspended. Once your account is approved, you kind of open up the map. If you see on the screen here, this is exactly what it would look like. So you can see the area. So if you notice there are borders around certain neighborhoods, it's basically a parking map, which lets you know where you can actually start and end each ride. You do have the ability to pause the ride outside of that zone, but if you were you went to the store, you got your groceries, you can pause it, and then you're going back home and you have legal parking, you would just end your ride there. And once you do reserve your moped, you have up to 15 minutes totally complimentary in order to get to the moped closest to you.
So as I kind of alluded to before, this larger launch last year, we saw tens of thousands of new users join in the first month. We had over 1.25 million rides and 3 million miles traveled. And then since that time, we've expanded to Austin, DC, Oakland, California, and Miami as well. And so we've always operated in partnership with local government. We recognize that we're using the public right of way, and that's really important to us. And so we have a proclamation here from Corey Johnson from the City Council, the Speaker of the City Council, kind of welcoming us to the city. We're very proactive about reaching out to council members and local community boards like yourselves as well.
Rebel, because we acknowledge that we use the public right of way and transportation is so essential to the life of any city, we really want the service to be equitable for everyone. So we started with the access program right at the beginning. Basically, any person on eligible or on public assistance is able to get a 40% discount on every single ride, which makes the service very, very affordable. And we're happy that to date we've been able to save over $125,000 to everybody on that program. And Lauren will talk a little bit more about this, but another program that we're especially proud of now during the COVID-19 pandemic is our healthcare worker program that Lauren will elaborate on a little bit more.
Yeah, so in March, we as a company sat down and thought really hard about what we could do to help. We wanted to be part of the solution for coronavirus. And so we decided in March of 2020 to make the service free for healthcare workers throughout the crisis. And we expanded our zone, our parking map in Brooklyn and Queens to encompass a few additional major hospitals. We also, and that, the reaction to that was really, really positive. I mean, it's really heartwarming to actually get these emails and messages from healthcare professionals who really appreciate having an option to transit to work while they can be socially distant from others, because it just kind of removes that additional stress. And so within a week after launching that program in Brooklyn and Queens, we started getting messages from healthcare providers in Manhattan and the Bronx. And so in response to those messages and with support from local council members and Corey Johnson, Speaker of the City Council, we decided to open up Manhattan as well as South Bronx. So the Manhattan zone is primarily north of 65th Street because that's where most of the parking is. But there are a couple of smaller areas, parking areas in lower Manhattan as well.
It's really important for us to be a good community partner, which is why we work really closely with NYPD just to inform them about the service, who we are, the vehicle type, just so they feel comfortable issuing citations when appropriate. We work with, like Lauren said, we work closely with city council members. You can see here Council Member Salamanca and Gibson really just enjoying the revels. And you can see our Revel Ranger program here as well. We have full-time staff that their sole job is to really go around, make sure the Revels are parked properly and everything is great. And this is something we're really, really proud of. We feel like the Revel community is really strong and people help us out all the time, whether it's saying, hey, like I saw somebody, parking too close to a fire hydrant or whatever it is. People trust us to be responsive, which is just really amazing.
Our company is also, we don't use the gig economy. And I think that's a really smart decision our founders made back in 2018 and has turned out to be very, very topical. So that's not part of our business model at all. Every person who works for the company is an employee and they get healthcare benefits. They get, paid vacation. They get the same healthcare that the CEO would get. And they also, if you're in the operations side, you get training in electric vehicle technology, which are really in-demand skills or will be in-demand skills, I believe.
Safety. Safety's a great concern of ours, which is why every single moped comes with 2 helmets in the back, a larger one and a smaller one, like I mentioned before. In my case, with my big head, I can only use the bigger one, but that's fine. We do offer lessons out of our Gowanus HQ 7 days a week. Right now, this program is paused just due to social distancing guidelines. We want to respect that. But we do have in-app tutorials where if you're a new user, you sign up, your account is approved, you can actually go through video tutorials that will teach you more about the moped and just give you some tips on how to ride. We're also currently working on a long form video that will mimic a a live lesson. So that's something that will hopefully be coming up soon in the next couple of weeks. And during peak season, when the weather is nice and people are ready to be outside, we do host pop-up lessons all over the city. So if a group of people are signing up, maybe there's 6 people somewhere in the Upper East Side or Upper West Side or in Astoria, wherever you are, we do come to you and we do offer those lessons.
Yeah, those might become Zoom lessons now.
Yeah.
So this last slide, I always like to mention this to people. On every moped underneath the dash, there's our customer support number. It's also on this slide. And as Carol was mentioning, like a lot of companies want to hide their customer support number when they want to keep that volume down. We are completely the opposite. We're trying to give our phone number out to everyone. We want you to call us with your complaints. If there's a rebel that's kind of parked in the way, if it's blocking a driveway, if someone's riding illegally or doing something illegal, we can suspend them from the service. If it is reckless driving or anything like that, please let the NYPD know as well. And that's why we're in contact with them, so that they know that they can enforce the rules. They can treat it like it's a motorcycle. They can treat it like it's any motor vehicle because it has a license plate. So we work really closely together on that. But honestly, I think you'll see we're new in your neighborhood, obviously, so we haven't had the opportunity to prove ourselves yet. But in the neighborhoods where we've been operating over a year or 2 years, we've developed a very strong rapport with community members because we're that responsive. So if you call us, we'll try and be there within 30 or 45 minutes to solve the issue. And we really strongly recommend that you call us and let us know, because we want even people who are not users, we want them to be happy with our service and with our company. Our reputation is really important to us. So with that said, Carol and I can take some questions. We only have until about 8:15 actually, because we have another meeting, but we'll speak really fast and try and answer as many questions as possible.
Thank you, Carol. Are there any members who would like a question at all? We see. Well,
I actually think I do see one. Judy, can you just give me a thumbs up on the screen if it's actually you? Yes.
Yeah.
So Judy Schneider is a public
Judy,
person.
Right. Judy Schneider. Yes, Judy. Why don't we unmute Barry and Judy there together?
Hi there. I just was wondering if they could tell us where the location of some of these scooters are in Community Board District 8. Is there a street or a block where they're parked? It's not clear to me if I wanted to go out and ride one tomorrow, where I'd find it in our area. They talked a lot about the other boroughs.
Yeah, definitely. So in Manhattan, it's north of 65th Street. But it is not there are no kind of docking stations or place you go. It's free floating. So they're constantly moving. You'd have to use the app to find where there's one closest to you. Our goal is to have one within a 5 to 10 minute walk of every person who wants to use one. But we're probably not at that right density yet in Manhattan. But above 65th Street on both the east and west side, you'll find some.
Good, thank you. Peter Borick had his hand up, I know, early. Can we unmute Peter?
Great, thank you so much. This is one of the better presentations I've seen over the years here in the Transportation Committee. I'm really happy to hear this, and I hope that the rest of the community board also feels similarly. It seems just like a great program. It enables us to keep some of the for hire cars to reduce that demand, which has been a huge problem in our community, and also to reduce some of the pollution, because this is all electric, which pollution has also been a big issue in our community. I have 3 simple questions that hopefully you can answer. One is, in New York City, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. Why is the governor on this 29 miles per hour, not the New York City speed limit of 25? That's one. The second question is, what outreach have you done to our 2 council members? I think you referenced Council Member Salamanca, and I'm not sure the other one. But what have Council Members Powers and Kalos said? And unfortunately, I feel like Governor Perry, the third question escapes me, but it'll come back to me in just a second. If you can leave me unmuted while you answer those 2, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So for the first question,
I'm sorry, I thought of the third one. Let me just
Yeah.
ask it now. In terms of COVID-19, so I'm a city bike user. And before shelter in place orders came in, I was fearful that the person before me could have maybe left COVID on the bike. So I'd bring my own disinfectant to the bike. What are you guys doing to try and help kind of disinfect in between rides, if anything?
Yeah, definitely. All very good questions. So first question, the speed limit in the city is 25 miles an hour. I think we all know that sometimes cars don't follow that speed limit. 29 miles an hour allows the rebels to keep up with traffic. That's one piece, that's kind of the logical piece there, but it is also the speed limit is set by the New York State DMV. So for this type of class of vehicle, 29 miles an hour is what is, this type of vehicle is defined as under legislation, under New York State. So your second question, so Keith Powers, Councilmember Powers actually was quoted in our press release. He has been very supportive of us in general, particularly because of our healthcare worker program. So he recognized in this community, there's a lot of healthcare workers who need to get to work, and being able to travel in a way that's socially distant is a really big advantage for them. And so, and Kalos as well, he wasn't quoted in our press release, but we've been in contact with his office as well, and he's been relatively supportive too. Your third question was on the disinfecting. So as a company, we have always been really focused on disinfecting the mopeds before coronavirus started, just because you have a shared vehicle, a shared moped, it needs to be clean, it needs to be in top condition, because otherwise people won't want to use it. And then in, first of March even, we started to step that up. And what that means is just being extra diligent on cleaning the helmet strap, the visor, the helmets itself, every high touch surface of the moped, including the seat, the handlebars, the brake levers, with a high quality disinfectant that's rated by the CDC for coronavirus and other viruses like corona. And we also provide disposable hair nets as well. So that's something you can put on under your head and then wear your helmet on top of that. Yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing. We also recommend users to wash their hands before and after, to wear a mask. And we constantly are messaging in all of our channels, do not ride unless you need to. Because I think that's also something that's going to be challenging in the city as it comes back to work, is a lot of people are kind of bucking the trend. And we don't want people doing that. We want them to only travel if they definitely need to.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Next is Rita Popper. Can we unmute Rita?
Hi. How many of these mopeds do you envision being in Manhattan?
Right now we have about 400 of them. And we don't, it's not actually the right level of density. So a really important aspect of this service is density. As I mentioned, you have to be able to find one within 5 to 10 minute walk, and ideally 3 to 5 minute walk for it to really be useful. Otherwise, people will just end up calling a Lyft or an Uber. And so right now we're kind of at half the density we would like in Manhattan. We've just kind of been set back because of coronavirus and manufacturing timelines. Yeah, so we're a little bit short right now on how many mopeds we'd actually like to be in Manhattan and in the other boroughs as well. But we're hoping to fix that in the next couple of months.
Rita, did you have something else?
Yes,
Maybe muted
very
again.
quickly.
Sure.
You take us through, somebody goes and picks up a moped. They take the moped and they go to work. What happens with that moped while that person is at work? When City Bike, there's a dock there and somebody else can pick up the bike. But what happens to that moped when that person goes to work? And then what happens when they go home? They don't take it home. They have to go back to where they took it from. Is that correct?
No, so that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So when you ride a Revel, when you're done, you park it in a legal parking spot and you end your ride and it turns off. Then it kind of pops up on the app and it's available to anybody else to ride. And so, so you would go to work, you would park the Revel outside of work in a legal parking spot. you end your ride, and then you're done with it. And that's part of the beauty of it, the convenience of it, is that you don't have to worry about it after that. If you, however, you were popping into the store, you wanted to grab some milk and you wanted to keep your revel, what you can do is you park it in a legal parking spot and you can pause your ride. And then when you come out 15 minutes later, however long it takes you, your revel will be waiting for you. No one else can reserve it or rent it during that time.
Okay, thank you. Next, Alita Camp. Alita, can we unmute Alita?
Thanks, Chuck. So I have compliments on your access program and the healthcare workers riding for free and working with the community boards and the council members. But safety is a paramount concern to the community board. And as the streets come back to life, which I don't know when that will be, the congestion level will be dramatically different than it is now. To hear that the density of 800 mopeds in a city where people barely have room seems like a lot. So I have some questions flowing from that. Do you require that riders be trained, particularly in the traffic rules and having to obey the traffic rules? Because I've seen some crazy things from motorcycles, much less mopeds, which to some people might seem more like a bicycle than a motorcycle or a car.
Yes, 100%. So every rider must have a valid driver's license, which means that they know the rules of the road. And as Carol mentioned, we have quite a bit of literature, stickers on the mopeds itself, materials, videos, instructions within the app itself on the rules. I think generally we've seen really responsible ridership, and a lot of that is because of all this information we provide. It's also because we make sure that people have valid driver's licenses, that they're over the age of 21. So that's just kind of an internal company policy. We want to make sure people have some years of driving experience under their belt. And we also suspend users when they don't follow the rules. So people talk to their friends and they hear, oh, this person got suspended because maybe they ran a red light or they went the wrong way down one way, and now they can't use the service anymore. And that word gets around, and users learn very quickly because they want to be able to have access to the service. So we find that's very effective in kind of keeping a responsible user base.
Deterrence works well. So you find out when a cop writes a ticket, it goes through Revel to get to the person who rented the moped at that time, or do write the ticket and you hear about it?
Yeah, we have very good relationships with NYPD, so they'll often let us know. But we also have our employees that are out in the street. We also have a vast network of users and also community members. And so we're constantly getting reports to support@gorevel.com or to the phone number from our customer support team with photos. And so all you really need to do to maybe issue a complaint about someone's riding is to have either the license plate number and the time and date, or if you can't do that, the time and date would be good, particularly like the actual location where it was.
Oh, that's good to know. And then I just have one more question. You said there's insurance. So if someone is injured, they don't have to look to the rider because you don't know if they actually have insurance, but you have. How much insurance do you carry per incident?
Yeah, it's $50,000 per incident. And that rate was actually set by the New York State Board of Insurance because a Revel is considered a lightweight vehicle. So the damage it can create is lower than a vehicle.
Thank you very much. And I agree with Peter that it was a good presentation. And thank you for the time, Chuck.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Lita. Next is Michelle Birnbaum. Can you, Michelle?
Before we move on, we only have a few more minutes left before the Revel representatives have to leave the meeting.
Sure.
So I will request that the remaining speakers, if you can keep your comments to 15 to 30 seconds so we could hopefully get to everyone. And if not, again, you could raise your questions through the chat and we can pass those questions along so we can make sure we try to get everyone's questions answered.
Yes, definitely.
Michelle? Unmute Michelle.
Yeah. Where did these are electric vehicles? Where do they charge? I have about 3 questions. They're electric. Where do they charge?
So the batteries are removable. We charge them in our warehouse. And so we have a warehouse in Red Hook in Brooklyn right now.
So for example, my understanding is someone can ride on this and then they put it somewhere in a street near their destination. It rests there until the next person finds a location on a map, on their app, and then they go and they get that bike. So explain to me how that is cleaned in between that drop off and that pickup. And how is it charged? Who's following the battery level? So those are two questions. Also, how do you identify a healthcare worker who's picking it up? So if you can answer those.
Yeah, I'll start with those. So we clean the mopeds every time we swap the batteries. So our field technicians will go to the moped, do that thorough cleaning. They also do a mechanical inspection to make sure that it's safe. And so it varies depending on the battery life and how quickly that goes down. But we're not cleaning them between every ride necessarily. We just can't. We don't have the resources to do that, which is why we ask that our users follow CDC guidelines and wearing gloves while they're using it.
So your app is following the electric, how much this battery is charged, so that you know if a bike is left on thus and such a street, your app will show you that the battery is running low, and then you go out and you charge it. Is that how?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and users can see the battery life as well. So if they open up the app, they'll probably see a couple of revels around them and say this one has 55 miles of charge, this one only has 13 miles of charge, and they can pick which one they want to ride.
But they won't necessarily notify you.
It's all kind of tracked in a back end app. So we have visibility into the battery life of every moped that we have.
Okay, on the insurance, is $50,000 an incident? Who picks up the rest of it if there's an extraordinary accident? Does that go to the individual's liability?
We also have an umbrella policy as a company, but we allow the insurance companies to work that through, and our customer support will walk someone through that process as well.
If we can just give Sharon a chance to ask her question, since she got locked out of the last discussion.
Yeah.
And then we'll end this. I'm sorry to cut Michelle off, but I'm just trying to be fair to everyone.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it. I'm a little bit confused. If we are are we passing a resolution to support this initiative? That's my first question, basically to the chairs. Secondly, I'm very concerned and confused. These mopeds can go 29 miles an hour, but the speed limit is 25. So if we are to support this, then I would ask that we include some type of language that asks that all riders ride 25 miles or less in the city. That's first. Secondly, I guess I'm confused because I thought that everyone who's in a motorized vehicle has to go 25 miles an hour. This is the first time that I have heard that there are exceptions to that. I mean, other than first responders. And so I'm hoping that somebody on the board might be able to clarify that for me, maybe Chuck or Craig.
Okay, Sharon, let me give you my understanding, and Lauren can correct me if I'm wrong. The way it's designed, there's a maximum speed of 29 miles an hour. That's the specifications of it. And that covers, obviously these vehicles are not just in New York City, but they're in a number of places around. So that covers beyond the city, but they have to follow all traffic regulations in the city. So the driver, just like a car, I mean, this is more like a car, even though it's electric and it's smaller and lighter. They have a license plate. You have to have a license to drive it, a driver's license. You have to follow all the rules of the road. I think Lauren said that, or Carol. So even though it theoretically can go 29 miles an hour, just like your car that can go 100 miles an hour, when you're in New York City, you're supposed to drive 25 miles an hour. And that's the speed limit.
And I also think, if I'm not mistaken, while in Manhattan, all roads that are on limited access highways are restricted to 25 miles per hour, I think there are some exceptions, and perhaps even in Manhattan, there are exceptions where the speed limit may be 30 or 35 on wide boulevards, such as West Street may be an example, and certainly in the outer boroughs where I believe Revel operates as well. So they need to be inclusive of other roadways beyond just what we have in our community.
Right. And I think the question of the resolution also, I don't know that we've been asked to pass a resolution, and I'll leave that to, I don't know whether Lauren or Carol want to comment on that. And it's obviously up to the board whether or not anyone wants to put forth a resolution, because
Yeah,
we haven't been specifically asked on that.
Yeah, we actually aren't asking for a resolution. We're not asking for anything. We just want to open up the line of communication between yourselves and between us to give you our contact information. And I know this is new to your area. You may not have even seen them yet, but we would like to come back in a couple of months when you have and seek feedback from you, because we're always interested in understanding people who actually live in the community, what we can change to do better.
We'll see if we're reveling in it or not. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for the time. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Hope to see you soon. Stay safe.
I think you folks have to leave, I guess, at this point, right?
We do, yes, but please feel free to email us questions, and we'll be happy to come back as well.
Okay, thank you. Good presentation.
All right, have a good night.
Item number 3. Craig, do you want to take this item? I know you've been working on this. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Item number 3, I'm just going back to the agenda. I assume this is the Queensboro Bridge discussion?
Right. Yeah, discussion regarding potential short-term bike/pedestrian safety improvements across the Queensboro Bridge in response to COVID-19.
Right.
And also gave us some of their, their position at this point.
So just a quick review of what the board has done in the past and what this discussion is going to revolve around. So a few months back, we had a discussion and passed a resolution asking the Department of Transportation to study the possibility of converting the south outer roadway of the Queensboro Bridge into a pedestrian lane or a non-vehicular lane. Currently, the north outer roadway is a combined bike and pedestrian pathway. And the challenge is, because of the limited width of that roadway, bikes and pedestrians are sharing it in both directions. And even under normal circumstances, you don't have the ability to have pedestrians and those people who are on bikes interact in safe manners because of the fact people who are walking don't see what's coming from behind them, and bikers coming in the other direction may be coming fast, especially if they're going downhill on the bridge. So there are a lot of safety concerns for both bikers and pedestrians because they don't really mix particularly well on the bridge. So there is interest in trying to find opportunities to improve that situation. The borough president had written a letter saying that she was supporting this as a potential initiative, and we took action and supported essentially a study, which is not going to be able to be done immediately. It wasn't, it may not have been a study, but it was asking DOT to look at the possibility of doing it. But this was going to have to fit into the context of the upcoming bridge deck replacement project of the Queensboro Bridge, in which they're going to have lane closures, and that south outer roadway would likely be needed in order to be able to meet vehicular demand. So that's where we were before the COVID-19 outbreak. And given the outbreak and the reduction in vehicular traffic and the increase in biking and the limited opportunities for people to take use non-motorized vehicles to cross between Queens and Manhattan, especially now at a time where public transportation is operating at reduced levels and people are not necessarily always comfortable to use public transportation. There's been discussion about trying to now provide a more immediate type of access on the bridge to make conditions safer and to allow a potentially exclusive bike lane so pedestrians would have their own space. We don't know what the best solution is, and as you heard Colleen from DOT say earlier, DOT is not seemingly not entertaining right now the discussion of converting the South Outer Roadway on a short-term basis. So what we are discussing essentially is the whole spectrum of opportunities perhaps, and whether there is an interest of within the board to request DOT to look at short-term opportunities to provide that access. And I want to offer Billy an opportunity to speak because he is the one who had requested this item. And I know he's been working on this. Billy, are you there, and are you willing to talk?
He seems, I see him.
I'm willing to talk. Thanks. So I was about a week or two ago, I was actually biking across the North Outer Roadway, and it was around 3:45 in the afternoon. It was a weekday actually, and it was completely congested. It's a 10-foot wide roadway. You have a mere 4 feet for pedestrians. The remainder go to the cyclists. And it's impossible to socially distance, let alone be compliant with city regulations on what pedestrian and cyclist lane width should be. And it's not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I think we as a board have recognized this as a problem. That's why we passed the resolution in January. But I think it's taken on just a greater urgency given what we're experiencing with COVID. And this seems like an ideal opportunity and a logical opportunity to open up some space for pedestrians on the South Outer Roadway that Craig mentioned. And I think it's particularly so because we know how many essential workers, and it's delivery cyclists, it's hospital workers, it's anybody who needs to get from Queens to Manhattan and vice versa. Plus all of us who, we've talked about trying to go just get some fresh air, go to a park, go for a walk. That remains important to a lot of people. And it's impossible to do so safely on the Queensboro right now. So I think it's worth our attention to ask DOT to, reevaluate this, to consider pedestrianizing the South Outer Roadway during the course of, call it the Pause Act or the extent of the pandemic. And, I think we've heard that there's this bridge rehabilitation going on. So it would obviously need to be consistent with whatever they're doing on the bridge. But given that traffic has plummeted, I don't know the exact figures on the Queensboro, but it's down 70% around the city. Given that traffic has plummeted, it stands to reason that you could accomplish your rehabilitation goals while still, accommodating pedestrians on the South Outer Roadway. The last thing I heard this today from an article quoting Commissioner Trottenberg is there may be some concern about the height of the barrier on the South Outer Roadway. I think it's maybe 6 feet, and there's a concern about safety. So if we do take this up and pass a resolution, we may need to, ask DOT to consider that and put up some sort of netting or protection. But I think it makes all the sense in the world for them to pedestrianize the South Outer Roadway temporarily. And so I hope that's what we'll consider doing as a board.
So Billy, let me ask you, are you only interested in entertaining the South Outer Roadway as an option, or would you be willing to entertain other alternatives as well if DOT were able to come up with something, if they're going to stick to their position that the South Outer Roadway is unsafe, whether we believe that's really the case or not, if they were to offer other alternatives to be able to essentially provide the same outcome in terms of improved access, improved safety, would that be an option?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not inflexible on that. I don't see any reason not to be flexible. I'd be very curious, what that other option is, but yeah, for sure.
All right. Anyone who wishes to speak, please raise your hand. I'm looking to see if there's anyone from the public. At this point, I don't see any, but you are welcome to continue to raise your hand. At this point, I see Peter.
Sorry to interrupt, Craig. There is one person on the phone who I didn't see there before. So whoever that person is, it's *9 to raise your hand on the phone. Sorry, continue.
Okay, I do see Peter's hand is up, so we can unmute Peter.
Great. Thanks so much, Billy, for raising this. I had authored the resolution in the first instance, asking the DOT to study this. Sometimes this on our committee, the cyclists and the pedestrians don't really see eye to eye. I thought this was one of the times that the cyclists could see eye to eye, because sometimes folks that don't like the cyclists think that the cyclists are invading the pedestrian space. This is the rare opportunity where the cyclists want their own space and there potentially is that space. And so everyone can kind of get their own space and be happy. So I think this is a great resolution. Billy, I think it's a great idea now more than ever to bring this up. So I would support this.
Does anyone want to make a resolution? I gather, Billy, what you're talking about is doing something during the pendency of this pandemic and doing some kind of a temporary thing and making that available to pedestrians, the south side of roadway.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I would second that.
And so I would propose, I'd propose a resolution to that effect right now, unless we want to have some further discussion.
Well, we can have discussion certainly after you propose it. Is there a second by anybody? You can just raise your hand or
raise your actual hand or virtual.
Peter just seconded and Roberta also did. Okay. And I see
Rebecca as well.
Roberta.
I think Rebecca actually had her hand up for a question. So.
No, I don't think she has a question. I think she was seconding it.
Oh, okay. Then I'm gonna put your hand back down. Rita, the same too? Okay. Great.
All right. Is there any further discussion?
Michelle?
Right, Michelle?
Not quite understanding. This is the south roadway, the outer roadway that had been open to traffic, to cars. And now the proposal is that it's closed and shared by pedestrians and bikes. Is that what we're talking about? What are we talking about? I'm picturing the south roadway.
Yes.
That goes from Manhattan to Queens.
Correct.
Right? And in the past, that was open to vehicles. And now, am I understanding that it is currently closed to vehicles and being shared by bikes and pedestrians? Is that the current situation?
No. Here, let me. So basically, the way it works right now is that the south roadway is open only for vehicles, and the north roadway is only for for bicyclists and for pedestrians. And the suggestion is to close the south roadway to cars and have the south roadway just be for bicycles and the north roadway be just for pedestrians. That way pedestrians can walk the bridge without fear of a cyclist hitting them, and the cyclists can cross the bridge without having to weave in and out of pedestrians. Does that make sense?
You're suggesting that this only be temporary, and what is your time parameter for that?
I would defer to Billy because it's his resolution.
I would probably borrow the language maybe that we used in the Park Avenue resolution, but if there's no good guidance in there, I just think, either language saying, through the course of the pandemic or until the Pause Act is lifted. That's
well, I think
you can't say the course of the pandemic. The pandemic will be here until we have a vaccine.
Well,
the only thing that might mitigate to us is when we have remediation like medication. So when you say that, you're talking about possibly years. Right. So before you make such a resolution, I think you should consider something that makes sense in terms of timing. Otherwise, you're talking about almost, forever.
I think you can say, Billy, suggestion here, and Michelle, I think that's appropriate. While the pause is in effect, until the governor basically opens things up in New York City or in Manhattan, or not Manhattan, but New York City. And I think he'll do that, obviously, at some point, but I think it's going to be later than things are opened up in other places around.
Right, and
Will this continue through the winter months in what you're thinking?
I would imagine this could very well continue through the winter months. I think one of the big unknowns is at what point in time, not only will we return to a more normal situation in terms of society and working, but with commuting, it's especially unknown as to how people's travel habits are going to change and their commuting patterns. Will people return to subways and buses and use them the way that they did before? Or will more people be telecommuting right now? Are traffic volumes going to return to the current levels to the pre-COVID-19 levels that we saw back in January and February? Or are they going to now return to a new normal, which may be at a reduced congestion level because there's less people that are commuting?
But that same thinking goes to the winter months when pedestrian and biking will also be reduced across the bridge.
So maybe we want to look at a time frame for this, and one suggestion could be setting it for whether we want to say 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and then we revisit it. That could be an option if we can't find any language that accommodates the evolving situation in terms of COVID-19 and where we are as a society that we can't really predict.
It's up to Billy, I guess. Billy, do you have any thoughts on that? It's your resolution.
Yeah, my preference would be not to time limit it. We can always revisit it and say, look, things have changed. Nobody's walking across the bridge. It's December. But, you know, we don't know where we'll be when the winter comes. And if this pause act is still in effect in the winter, I think you're going to see, you know, continued demand for people to get where they need to get by walking and biking and not by your other typical means of transportation. So I think the need will still be there. So I wouldn't time limit it.
Why don't we get a couple of questions? I see Felice Farber, you have your hand up. Why don't we unmute Felice? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, I had a question about, so the city's broke right now and has really put a pause on a number of capital projects. And I'm not even sure that the Queensboro Bridge reconstruction project isn't on pause as well because of some contractor issues. So it's certainly something that's desperately needed. I'm wondering if there's a cost-effective way that the city could put up some kind of fence or safety barrier, and maybe in coming up with something we should suggest or look into just how do we do it in a cost-effective manner. Because I agree that the additional bike lane is essential. I'm just concerned that the city doesn't have the money to proceed with something like this.
I don't think the money is going to be an issue, Felice, just my view on it. I think that the city's not going to do anything major here, if they do anything at all. And if I had to put my money on it, I don't think they probably want to do anything. But I think it doesn't mean we can't obviously pass a resolution and ask them to do it. But I think, and I don't think they're going to be in the position, and they won't spend a lot of money on this. They'll do it in a way that makes sense with some signs and some whatever else they need. But I don't think it's going to be major. That'll be a major issue, as I see it anyway. Sharon, I think you wanted to make a comment. Can we unmute Sharon?
Yes. First of all, thank you, Craig, for that general overview. You didn't miss a thing. And also, Billy, really appreciate you re-engaging us in this conversation overall. I do agree that this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be supportive of pedestrians and also be supportive of cyclists as well. I do not believe that we should indicate a time frame within this resolution. I don't see this pandemic being over anytime soon. I do envision that it is a sea change for this city, particularly in terms of how we view transportation. I will say that on the bicycling side of things, that the number of people who are choosing to bike has really exploded exponentially, as it should. However, we desperately need to have additional space for pedestrians who want to walk as well. I want to be able to walk with my mom, who's in her 80s, across the bridge very slowly so she could see the tram from the bridge. And you know what? I think we can make this happen. And thank you again, Billy, for this conversation, for initiating this conversation. And to move this along, is it possible for someone to propose a resolution, not including a specific time frame, because I don't think that we need that, but just supporting the idea of having a roadway, the north roadway for bikelists and the south roadway for pedestrians.
I think, Sharon, thank you, but I think here's what I see as a little problem. We passed a resolution to do something in general about this. I think we're looking at now doing something and asking them to do something special because of the COVID-19 situation and crisis here. So I think even if we don't put any particular time, but I think we have to relate it to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think we have to say something like, until such time as the governor opens things up in accordance with his criteria or something like that, because I think you're not going to get DOT's attention otherwise here.
And I would, I'm sorry. And I would just add that I think there is a distinction between a long-term solution in which you would have potential capital costs to implement something that is permanent in nature versus doing something that would be meant to be a short-term solution that would be done without the same permanency in terms of the way that they would set it up and keep people safe. Where it can be removed if and when the time comes to remove it, especially if they are going to at some point move forward with a bridge replacement project and they need that roadway for another purpose. And in terms of proof of concept, even if we had to see a temporary solution end, if we're able to show that and demonstrate that it works and that there aren't any adverse impacts in terms of traffic congestion, then we would be in a better position to be able to show that we could have this as a potential long-term solution. So that's sort of my take on it.
Yeah. Why don't we get, Rebecca hasn't spoken on this. Rebecca Dangor, why don't you unmute Rebecca, Will, and you wanted to say something. I see you had your hand up.
I believe that this is, I think it might have been in the resolution Billy proposed, but either way, I'll offer a friendly amendment that we include that the time frame is for at least the duration of the pause. That ties it in. So if Billy accepts it, that's my friendly.
At least for the duration of the pause?
Why don't you make it for the duration of the pause? That makes it.
Well, because that's what I thought at first, but I heard that some members of the committee really wanted it to be extended longer. But I think based on Colleen, the exchange Colleen and Craig had earlier in the meeting, we want it to be focused on as a response to this specific crisis we're in. And I think if anything, at least for the duration of the pause, adds that in theory, we would like it for longer, but we need it right now more so.
I think, Rebecca, just a comment. I think that leaves it more open-ended. I think we really should focus it on the pause because that separates it from what we've done before. And for the reasons Craig stated, that keeps it out of saying, well, we want something even going beyond that. And that puts other issues into play, which I think the DOT will have concerns about. So my
Okay,
sense
then
is
I'll
we're better off.
amend it to just the duration of the pause then.
Right. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question regarding the pause? In terms of the executive action that I guess is the pause something that, assuming that we enter a reopening phase and go through the different tiers of the reopening process, is that effectively the end of the pause? I guess my concern is that if we relate it to the pause and the pause essentially is ending sooner rather than later because it has a different connotation than whatever the next phase is, that it's not going to be long enough, and that the pause may evolve into a different type of action that we don't know what it's going to be called, but will have the same impact in terms of the way that people are living their lives.
Craig, I don't think that's going to be an issue because the governor was very specific in laying out, his certain stages where he's going to basically end the pause, right? And there's going to be stage 1, which is, like construction and manufacturing. Stage 2, which is professional and other financial and those kinds of things. Stage 3 being, restaurants and things like that. And stage 4 being, the Metropolitan Opera and those kinds of big gatherings. So I don't think you're talking about, and I think things are going to proceed fairly slowly. I don't see us getting out of phase 1 that soon, frankly, and getting into it because like my office, we're going to be in phase 2, right? I'm a lawyer, so a professional. And I don't think we're going to be getting back to our offices that soon. So I don't think that's a practical problem. That's all I'm saying. I mean, are we ready? Do you think we're ready to vote on this, folks? Anybody have to say something on this? I see I see Sharon has her hand up. Sharon, quickly, why don't we?
Yeah, can we do it for a year? My recommendation's for a year. I think it would be good to have something definitive. We can say that although it is due to COVID, that extending it for a year will give us an opportunity to get data, see how it works. I think we ought to just do it for a year.
I don't know what Billy thinks about that. I think we're better off tying it to the pause situation. Billy, it's up to your amendment.
I tend to agree with you, Chuck. I just, if Sharon thinks, and if you all think it would make sense to say a year or the end of the pause act, whichever, I mean, I don't know, whichever.
No, I yield to what your thinking is about this, Billy. So, and also Chuck, if you want to tie it more directly to pause.
Yep.
I just don't want it to be something that it's just for a few months.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to be just for a few months, Sharon.
Okay.
I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay.
See, Barry had his hand up, but as he wants to maybe have a vote, is that what he's trying to do? Can you shake your head or do you want to say something?
Call the question.
Okay. All right. Question's been called. And I think the way we should vote the way Alita did it at the full board, and that is that we'll presume everyone is for it, except you should raise your hand, if you're against it or if you're abstaining, and we'll call on you then. So, okay, so Michelle Birnbaum, are you no?
Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle is no. Okay, and is anyone else? Do you see anyone else? Will, I don't see anyone else.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay, well, good. So we have a whole.
Do you want to verbalize who all we have in the room so that it's in the record for?
Craig, do you?
Sure.
You have the list?
Yes, I'm going to go down the list as I see it. It's myself, Billy, Chuck, Alita, Barbara Rudder, Barry, Felice, Jack, Jordan, Let me scroll down. Lori, Marco, Michelle's a no, we said. Peter, both Rebecca's, Rebecca Dangor, Rebecca Lamort, Rita, Sharon, and Taina, Trisha, Valerie.
Is anybody whose name not on that list want to either raise your hand or be recognized? Did we get everybody? Well, it looks like we may. And I want to, this is probably the largest group we've ever had at our committee. So I want to appreciate everybody showing up. I didn't know this was so interesting. You didn't have anything better to do. Okay, so why don't we get on to this last item. This is discussion regarding a temporary suspension of the $2.50 congestion fee on yellow taxis in Manhattan south of 96th Street. And we already previously requested that we eliminate it. And this is on the agenda because Valerie Mason has asked it to be. And I'd like Valerie to lead off and say a few words. If you could unmute Valerie then.
Thanks, Chuck. You're absolutely correct. We've come out against this surcharge as being essentially unfair to our neighborhood. It's beyond, just to recap a little bit, it's beyond the proposed congestion pricing zone to begin with on a permanent basis. But since there are so many questions about public transportation and who will be able to use it, I just thought it was extremely unfair that people who live in our neighborhood, who need to get to a doctor, who need to get somewhere, unlike any other neighborhood in the entire city of New York, are forced to pay these additional charges, whether it's $2.50 in a taxi or $2.75 in an Uber. And I think we should petition the electeds to get this charge removed. We're back to this question again of for however long the pause is. But I do think it's really unfair, especially to the elderly in our neighborhood who are being told essentially not even to get on public transportation. This would be their only other way of getting around if they don't have their own private car. And I just think it's very unfair to ask them to pay this tax essentially that no other senior citizen or somebody who's disabled has to pay to move from their house to a neighborhood doctor, et cetera. So I think that pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. And I just also want to say that I understand that the MTA is bleeding money, but I really don't think that this is the way, whether this charge is in effect or not, is really not going to be a real, is really going to make a really big difference to that deficit. And it would make a really big difference to people who need to get around locally in our neighborhood. So that's all I'll say.
I think, Valerie, we have a good opportunity. I know Marcus' book was saying they're trying to get people to use more of, cars in the way of transportation, particularly during this period. And then I think that they give us a little more of an argument why we should do this during the pause period. The same kind of language that was in Billy's resolution. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on this? Any member of the public? Do you see anything, Will, on that?
Nothing yet.
Okay, and I see that. Valerie, did you want to make that as a motion? Now you can make.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a motion that we move to, basically urge our electeds to remove this charge during the whatever language we're using for the others during the pause or the pandemic to alleviate or facilitate the movement of the citizens in our district.
I see Rebecca Dangor wants to second that, and Sarita also. So that's good. Any further discussion? I see Trisha Shimamura. Why don't we unmute Trisha? Okay.
I don't want to belabor this, but I 100% agree. I just want to add that the last time I think this came up, I think that a member of the public may have mentioned just as a parent in the neighborhood that it's sometimes incredibly difficult to get across town with your children or things like that. A lot of our family of friends in the neighborhood have pediatricians across town on the Upper West Side or things like that. there's a lot of essential reasons why you need to get across the city. And yeah, and attacks just on this area, if you're going down a little bit to get to the hospitals, is really just unfair, particularly at this time when you don't or can't go on public transportation because of safety measures. So 100% in agreement. Just wanted to voice for those folks out there with families, this is also helping them.
Thank you. I see Marco, who hasn't talked tonight. Marco, why don't you go ahead? Can we unmute Marco?
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if it's premature, but I would like to call the question.
Well, why don't we wait? We have a couple of people.
Sure.
We only have a couple of people, Marco, who.
Sure, yes.
We only have.
Thank you.
Sure. How about Felice, Felice Farber? Felice, why don't we unmute Felice? She's got her hand up.
Sure. Just what I was going to say is the MTA is hemorrhaging money. And while this is not going to be huge dollar amounts for them, I think we should be concerned about any impacts to remove a potential revenue stream from the MTA. So if we do something, it should be for a limited period of time. I'd be concerned that at anything that impacts a desperately needed revenue stream for the MTA, especially since bringing them back and having them get money is critical for the economy of the whole region. So again, I appreciate the issues that people are raising. And I think if we do something, it should really be limited to just this time when people are concerned about the health impacts of taking mass transit.
I think, Felice, I think that's the idea, during this period, you do that. I think we all are concerned about the revenue. And I think the MTA is going to need a really big infusion of revenue, but I think this is just for that limited period where people are not going to want to get on mass transit and are going to want something as an alternative, and they don't want to, they want to still social distance during this. Lori Boris had a comment.
Yes, I just have a question, which is, sure, would this be for the Ubers as well, or is it just for the yellow cabs?
I think Valerie's resolution covers beyond the yellow cabs, right?
Well, I mean, I would just want to open it up to whatever it's $275 for the Uber, it's $250 for the yellow taxi. I mean, I don't care if it's both. People have a feeling about that, but I don't really care.
Well, I think we should be consistent with our original resolution. That
okay, that's fine with me.
Because I think there will be potential concerns if we extend it beyond a city-supported and funded entity such as the TLC. If you get into, and yes, Uber and Lyft are struggling mightily right now, but so are yellow cabs. And one of the motivations of our initial resolution was the sensitivity we have towards the taxi drivers that are really suffering.
Yeah, that's correct. You're right, Craig. And I just want to also point out, because Felice made the point about the MTA. I mean, you still have the 75-cent drop or whatever the drop is, the other surcharge. We're not even asking for the removal of that. It's just this one particular $250 charge. So yeah, I would accept it just being the taxis, because I think it has, no pun intended, an extra lift for the taxi industry. So
yeah, no, I think Craig is right on that. And so, and thanks for pointing that out on that, Lori. Okay, I don't see any further hands up. Can we vote on this? I'll take that. Yes. So why don't we assume that everyone is in favor unless you show a hand and want to vote no or abstain. Yes, please.
A hand, if you could raise your hand in Zoom.
Well, that's all right. She's raised it, so we could, Felice, go ahead. Why don't you unmute?
Let me find her. Felice?
I'd abstain.
Okay, so we're all in favor and one abstention.
Oh, I see Sharon Pope Marshall and Jordan Woke and Peter Bork are all waving and have things going on in their screens.
All right, so why don't we why don't we go along as well? How about Peter?
I abstain.
Abstain,
For the purposes of police.
Okay, how about Jordan?
1 second, I'm gonna find him.
Fine, Jordan.
I was afraid that you were going to leave without recognizing people whom I could see raising their hands. I'm in favor.
Well, could you raise it in the participants feature going forward? It is very important. That's how we're doing it. If you don't do it that way, we won't see you. We said that at the beginning.
Will has to see you. He's in charge here. So go ahead, but we go ahead, Jordan. You want to abstain or no or whatever?
I'm in favor.
Oh, you're in favor. Okay, we didn't have to raise your hand then. Sharon, how about Sharon Pope Marshall? Can we unmute her?
Yes.
I'm
Sharon.
opposed. I'm opposed.
Sharon
Again.
says no.
Okay.
So let me just go through the list. And if I miss anyone or misrecord anyone's vote, please raise your hand in Zoom to correct the record. So voting yes is me, Chuck, Barbara, Barry, Billy, Jack, Jordan, Lori, Marco, Michelle, Rebecca, Dangor, Rita, Trisha, Atana, Rebecca Lamort, Alita, Valerie, and I have Sharon as a no and Peter and Felice abstaining.
If anyone has a difference, just raise the hand in the in Zoom or that hand figure. Seeing none, I think we're okay. So we don't have anything else on the agenda. So I think we're prepared to adjourn, and I appreciate the people in the public being here and also our board members, and thank you all for your participation, and we'll see everyone next month, and hopefully stay well, everyone, and take care.
Stay healthy.
And thank you, Will, for your help as always in doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night.